C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters, I think is one of the most imaginative and creative ways to talk about the Christian life. If you haven't encountered that book, it takes a little bit of getting used to. C.S. Lewis writes from the perspective of a older, more experienced demon writing to a younger trainee demon about how to trap and discourage Christians. So you have to get used to the language of the book. He's writing from the perspective as a demon. So the enemy is God. The enemy's people is the church. Our people is non-Christians, and Satan is our father. That's the way the book goes. And if there were to be a Screw Tape Letters about missions, I think it would go something like this. So this is my attempt to impersonate a demon here. It's my first attempt. We'll see how it goes. I'm not sure I want to be terribly successful at this, but here it goes. Dear Screw Tape, the modern missions movement has been one of our biggest failures of the last 200 years. Our Father is very angry about this. If we can keep people away from the gospel, they remain ours. But if the enemy succeeds in getting that terrible news about Jesus to them, the people can be very quickly lost to the enemy. In less than a generation, we've seen whole nations fall into the enemy's camp. You are right, Screwtape. We need to target the missionaries, those people who bring the enemy's message to our people. But so far, all our efforts to stop the missionaries have achieved very little success. We tried to make those places where the enemy's message has not reached dangerous. But this has only made the young missionaries more eager to go there. Somehow we forgot that the threat of death has no effect upon those who are solidly in the enemy's camp. We've tried to make the enemy's people fight amongst themselves. And in this we've achieved more than we ever thought possible. But it has not really done anything to stop the missionaries themselves. We've injected some serious theological problems in the missionary education system. We hope this will yield some good results for us in the next 20 years. But we need something more immediate. We need to stop the missionaries right now. To this end, I'm writing with some good news. Our extensive research has turned up one very simple but effective way of neutralizing the missionaries. Get them hooked on what the enemy's people call pornography. Here's what I suggest. First, you need to bombard them with normal discouragements. Make their lives as uncomfortable as possible. This shouldn't be hard because they've left everything that is familiar to them, and life is hard. Make them feel isolated, cut off from the fellowship of the enemy's people. Make them tired. Again, this isn't difficult, as living in a foreign country is exhausting. Make them discouraged. This is easier than you would think. Even though what they are doing is devastating to us, they usually don't see the results they expect, so they spend most of their time feeling like failures. At some point, the missionaries are going to crave something to stop the constant pressure and stress. When you see them reach this point, offer them some comforting images. Our research has shown that it is equally effective with both men and women, although the approach needs to be slightly different. I can explain more about that later. They will fall more easily than you think. The enemy's people lift up missionaries so highly that the missionaries will assume they are immune from this sort of temptation. This has an additional advantage. Once they have fallen into this temptation, they won't know what to do. Most likely, they will keep it a secret and promise themselves never to do it again. At this point, it is best to give them weeks or months of success in this area so they think they have beaten it on their own. Then introduce the temptation again, and within a few months, they will be entirely neutralized. They will not pose any serious threat. Try this approach and let me know how it goes. I'm happy to help along the way. While that was my first attempt to impersonate a demon, I'm not sure I wanted to do that very well, but I hope you can see where this is going. The evidence of pornography being an effective strategy to bring down missionaries is only anecdotal. I have not done extensive research, but I have been a missionary myself in Turkey. I think I understand something of the pressures there. I've interacted with a number of mission pastors and mission boards, and And I think I can say that there is a unique temptation, a unique vulnerability, and a unique seriousness to the consequences for missionaries. And sadly, some missionaries have not stopped at pornography, but have gone on to commit terrible abuses. Mission organizations have been brought down because of this. And so if we're going to think about equipping the church to reach the nations, I think we need to think seriously about how to build a culture that is resistant to pornography. So what I want to do here is actually a talk that I've done before that has been well received. And this is basically a theology of pornography. And after doing some brief theology of what pornography is and what it does, then I want to look at 5 things we can do to help build a culture that is resistant to it. So here we go. First, we need to have some idea of what we're talking about. So here's a definition of pornography. This comes from the Baltimore Catechism of the Catholic Church. It goes like this. Pornography consists in removing real or simulated sex acts from the intimacy of partners in order to display them deliberately to third parties. It does grave injury to the dignity of its participants, actors, vendors, the public, since each one becomes an object, that's a key word there, object for base pleasures and illicit profit for others. It immerses all who are involved in the illusion of a fantasy world. I think that's a good definition, and I applaud the Catholic Church in spending the time to try to get it right. What it's basically saying there is that pornography removes aspects of the sexual relationship from the private sphere of partners where it can be a mutual giving and receiving in the context of a relationship, hopefully a marriage relationship. It removes it from that and makes it public. This would include hardcore pornography, softcore pornography, a whole host of things. Okay, so that's what it is. Why is it wrong? I think one of the problems in the church's approach with pornography is that it's been too pragmatic. Pornography is wrong because it does bad things, is what we say. And in a sense, I've played right into that, right? Because I'm saying it's wrong because it'll prevent the spread of the gospel. But I think if we really want to develop a culture resistant to pornography, we need to think about not simply the bad things it does, but the essence of why it is wrong, why it is terribly wrong. And I think the essence is this. Pornography objectifies people. It turns them into objects. It disembodies them. There's a lot of C.S. Lewis in this talk. In the Chronicles of Narnia, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the White Witch turns people into stone. Their bodies are still there, and in some sense they're beautiful, but there's no person there any longer. Pornography is like that white witch. It's turning people into stone, those who produce it and those who view it. It's turning them into mere objects. Or to put it another way, in the words of one of the former popes, pornography is not wrong so much for what it reveals, but for what it obscures. By revealing the flesh, it obscures the person. I think that's brilliant. It obscures the person. That's what's so wrong about it. Now, why is it wrong to obscure the person? Well, because God created the person. He created the person not as a mere body, not as an object, but as body and soul. In other words, there's a material part of us, right? That's the part that you see on the video screen, right? And an immaterial part of us. That's the part of me that cares about this topic and wants to communicate it to you. The material and the immaterial are supposed to go together as a unit. I don't simply want to say that our bodies are part of who we are. It's more like our bodies are a perspective into who we are. We are our bodies, but not mere bodies. As one philosopher said, me and my body are not two things, but one thing. And our desire as people who are made by God as body and soul is to live out a unity as body and soul, to live out that cooperation and unity together. So there is a unity between us as body and soul, and it is wrong to do anything that would obscure that unity, such as looking at the person as though the person is just a body. I think we can understand this through our everyday experiences. Let me explain. Imagine with me that you're with a small group of friends and you just enjoy being with them. You're comfortable around them. How are you acting at that point? Well, you're probably talking with your hands, kind of like I'm doing now, right? You're smiling, you're laughing. You're not conscious of the fact that you're a body, right? You're not conscious of the fact of what am I actually doing. No, your mind and your body are engaged as one seamless reality as you're interacting in that world. That feels good, right? And that's how God created us to be. And the epitome of that is in our worship of God. Remember, Jesus said that the first commandment is to love the Lord your God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Notice the connection between the material self and the immaterial self. Heart, soul, mind, and strength. That brings in the body. Worship of God engages the whole person as a person. And those who love God will enter heaven, a place where they will be perfect. And that perfection is not simply in the mind and the soul, but also in the body, because they will be raised in a new body in resurrection life. Now, I gave you one thing to imagine about when the body and soul are working together. Imagine a situation where they actually feel very disconnected. I'll give you something from my own experience. I was a missionary in Turkey, and at one point I had a knee infection. The only knee infection I've ever had. It was really weird. My knee swelled up 3 or 4 times its normal size, and I realized I needed to go see a doctor. So I went to this hospital, and it was in a place where not many Westerners lived. And I said, I have a problem with my knee. And all of a sudden, swarms of doctors came to see me, not because I was in any dire situation, but because they had never seen a white person's swollen knee before. And so I had all these doctors gathered around me, poking at my knee and talking to each other in a language that I couldn't understand. And I remember feeling very uncomfortable. Like my body is very present here, but nobody cares about me. I wanted to get up and walk away, but I couldn't because my knee wouldn't work. Or imagine a socially awkward situation, right? You've probably had that happen, where maybe you're talking to somebody and then somebody else comes up and talks to that person and you're just sort of standing there. Well, you're not free talking with your hands. You're actually conscious at that point of the space your body is taking up. And you're like, should I do this? Should I do that? And it feels awkward because you're like, your body is there and you're not sure what to do with it. Or some people I know find that when they do something that they know is wrong, sinful, they feel very conscious of their body. I've had people tell me, I just feel dirty all over. It's a feeling in their body. Or I feel defiled. Or I had one friend who said that when he did something wrong, all he wants to do is take a shower. Maybe you can remember a time in school where you did something wrong and your teacher called you out and you just want to sink down and you wish life had trapdoors because you want to get your body out of that situation. The Bible has a word for that. It's called shame. Ed Welch defines shame as when you have acted less than human, you are treated as less than human, or associated with something less than human, and there are witnesses. What's interesting to me is that shame is a moral category, right? And yet it is something that we wear on our body. Mark Twain said, very insightfully, man is the only animal that blushes or needs to. We wear shame on our body. To experience shame is to experience the disharmony between body and soul. And you know, death is the ultimate shame. It is the ultimate separation between the body and soul, which the Bible says is most unnatural. The opposite of shame, though, and the opposite of death, is glory. And shame, death, and glory stand on opposite sides of the Bible. Shame is in the beginning, right after Adam and Eve sinned, and they felt shame and sewed fig leaves together to cover their nakedness. That is, to cover up their bodies. They knew they did something wrong, and they felt it in their body. And glory is at the end, when God will give his people new bodies, and they will be clothed with righteousness. Here's the point. There's a connection between our body and our total person. When our bodies are treated as mere bodies, like my experience in that hospital, or infinitely worse, in the case of a person being stared at or touched inappropriately, it isn't just something that stays on our body like a toothache or a broken arm. It affects the entire self, our whole person. And when something affects our whole person, like maybe we do something wrong, we perceive ourselves as inadequate in some essential way of being human. We have that feeling in our bodies. There's a reciprocal relationship between the body and the person. Why? Because me and my body are not two things, but one thing. The philosopher Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am," in the sense that the I is the thinking thing, the thing that thinks. But he's wrong. Yes, thinking is important, but the I, who I really am, must include the embodied self. It must include the body. Now, with that in mind, a little bit of a theology of the body, I want to argue that sexual relationship, in the way that God designed it, reinforces that organic unity between our body and our person, whereas pornography separates them. In other words, I want to try to convince you that pornography and a real sexual relationship, the way God designed it, are as different as they possibly could be. And I think the more we see that and realize that, the more we can be hardened against pornography. Now, to look at God's design for the sexual relationship, I want to turn our attention to the Song of Solomon. This is a book about marital intimacy. And there's 5 aspects of the relationship between the husband and the wife in Song of Solomon that I argue work towards that unity of body and soul, body and person, the wholeness of the person. I'm going to go through these here. There's much more that we could say about this book, but these are just 5 key highlights. Number 1, in Song of Solomon, the relationship is mutual. If you just sometime flip through that book, you'll notice, and if your Bible has headings to that book, it's even more clear, that it constantly goes from him to her, right? There's so much language of I and you and us. It opens with the stanza, "Draw me after you, let us run together." The man and the woman are equal participants in this drama of romance. They are doing this thing together. The philosopher Roger Scruton describes what's going on this way. He says, "She conceives of her lover, conceiving her, conceiving him." In other words, she sees him, seeing her, seeing him. And Scruton calls this an endless chain of reciprocal responses. She doesn't conceive of her husband abstractly, but as the one who looks at her. He looks at her as the one who looks back at him. That is, they don't view each other as mere objects, because they view each other as viewing them. You see, an object is just something we look at, but a subject has a first-person perspective in the world. A subject looks out at other objects. To view the other as an object would be to view them as a mere body, like a tree or a rock or even a painting. But they don't view the other as a mere object, because they view the other as one who is also viewing them. They view the other as a subject and not a mere object. To love a person is not to love an object, but a subject who might love you back. Roger Scruton also points this out, that every language has words for sex that are both tasteful and untasteful. And he points out that the tasteful words always describe the act mutually, to make love. In Turkish, the word literally means to mutually love one another. The non-tasteful words, which I won't repeat here, describe an act done as though to an object. So, first thing we see in Song of Solomon, that the relationship is mutual. We see this in the endless chain of reciprocal responses, which reinforces the fact that our lover is a subject and not a mere object. Number two, there is exclusivity. Think of the refrain in this book, I am my beloved and my beloved is mine. And at the end of the book, it talks about being jealous in a good, godly sense. You see, it's not the case that she merely wants a man, and any man with these similar characteristics will do. She wants him, only he will do. And he wants her, only she will do. This exclusivity shows that they're desiring a person as a person. If they were to desire a mere body, then any body that looks that way would satisfy them. But because only one person will satisfy them, it shows that it is a desire for a person. To want and be wanted as a person reinforces your identity as body and soul, and not a mere body. And so number two, there's exclusivity, which is really the exact opposite of what goes on in pornography, right? Where there's no exclusivity, it's public. Number three, they express their desire in words. So much of this book is the words they speak to each other. And the words they speak define the reciprocal relationship. Thus, the words give a context and an interpretation for the acts of their bodies. The actions of the bodies communicate, I am my beloved and my beloved is mine. We know that that's what the actions of their bodies mean because of their words. Or we could say that the words make the actions of the body sacramental. That is, the actions of the body picture a greater reality, a pledge to one another. Christian theology has often compared the consummation of marriage to baptism, a sign and seal of the covenant. Baptism is more than, as Peter says, the removal of dirt from your flesh, but an appeal to God for a new conscience. Likewise, sex, the way God designed it, is more than a mere biological act, but a sign and seal of the covenant of marriage. Without words, the actions of the body would simply be about pleasure and procreation. Animals mate. Humans make love. And words are a big part of the difference. Okay, so they use words. Number four, in Song of Solomon, there is a preoccupation with the face. The book of Song of Solomon is known for embarrassing preachers because it talks about all parts of the male and female body. My church, where I was a pastor, preached through the book of Song of Solomon. People said, well, isn't that embarrassing to preach through? I said, no, not at all, because the associate pastor is doing all the sermons. Well, it's true that all parts of the body are talked about. It is talked about in a very discreet way, which I think makes it fine to preach through, and great to preach through, and good to read to your children. And it's interesting that it focuses on select parts, which are not the parts you might think. It dwells on the face. Chapter 2, verse 14, let me see your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. And this connects with the previous point. Notice the connection between the words and the face, right? The second most discussed part of the face is the mouth, the lips. He loves her mouth and lips, but not just because he likes the color and the shape. He loves the words that come out of them. So his love for her body is tied to his love for her words. He's not thinking of her as a mere body, but a person, a total person. So the second most talked about part is the lips. The most mentioned part of the body in this whole book is the eyes. He calls them doves. The eyes are sometimes called, we would say, the windows of a person's soul. The eyes show most emphatically that the person is not a mere object, but a subject, because it is through the eyes that the person looks out on life and sees others. Through the eyes, that endless chain of reciprocal responses takes place. He, in seeing her eyes, sees one who is seeing him. But the preoccupation with the face can't be thought of as just a preference for the cerebral side of her. Humans are unique for showing their whole person on their face. We laugh, we cry, we smile, we frown, we blush, all in our face. And it's interesting, we have very little control over what our face does. Think of Sarah in the Bible who laughed when God promised her a child. She was responsible for that laugh, held accountable for that laugh, even though she didn't have direct control over it. And it came through her face. The face makes the body not a mere body, but a person. And therefore, preoccupation with the face is an affirmation of the person. Number 5, when the entire body is enjoyed, and it is in this book, it is enjoyed as one person said, quote, an index of the person. The complements of each other's body is not strictly physical because they're tied to the person's character. So when she says that his legs are like columns, it's a metaphor for the strength of his character. The tenderness of her breast is the tenderness of her soul. The beauty of her character and the beauty of her form are not two different beauties, but one. And as a result, their sexual relationship affirms each other as embodied individuals. She has a body. He is aware of that. He is making her aware of that. But the body is hers. She embodies it. All of his interactions with her are designed to bring together that body and person. Listen to what Roger Scruton says about the noble goal in sex. He says, in sex, I seek to unite you with your body. I seek to summons your perspective into your flesh so that it becomes identical with your flesh. I wish you to be your body. I seek to create unity between your consciousness and your body. God's plan for sex is the uniting of two individuals through their bodies, not as mere bodies, but as persons, in a person-to-person interaction. And this union helps us realize more of who we are in the image of God. We are body and soul. And therefore, according to Scripture, the act of marriage is one without any shame. It is entirely beautiful. And this is why we see an entire book in the Bible devoted to celebrating marriage. Now, in pornography, though, the exact opposite thing happens. In pornography, bodies are presented as mere bodies. Pornography, like slavery, denies the human subject. It separates the person from the body. It depersonalizes, it dehumanizes, it destroys. In pornography, a shift occurs from the embodied subject to the body as object. It might expose all of the body, but it leads the viewer to see the body not as the total person, but as a mere body. And thus it presents a distorted picture of what the body is. It reveals the flesh, but it obscures the person. In pornography, there can't be this endless chain of reciprocal responses, she conceiving him, conceiving her. And thus it is not the eyes that receive the most attention. There is no preoccupation with the face, but with other parts. I remember one woman writing about what it was like to be married to a man addicted to pornography, and she asked, why is he only interested in the sexual parts of my body? Why isn't he interested in me? You see what pornography does. It makes that division between the body and me. One author writes, for pornography takes one dimension of the human person, the visible body surface, and from it projects the whole person as a sexual object, an instrument for pleasure, a mere commodity to be marketed, manipulated, and consumed. In real sex, the body is enjoyed as an embodiment of the person. In pornography, the body is enjoyed as a mere body. The person viewing pornography is depersonalized as well. Instead of loving a real person who might love you back and looking at a real person who looks back at a person, instead the person viewing pornography becomes what one person said, the seat of sexual responses that answers only to itself. In other words, pornography comes with no risk. The pleasure that one might feel in their body while looking at pornography is not sacramental. It doesn't point to something beyond itself. It points only to the body as an end in itself. There is no eternal soul at play, but only that which is returning to dust. In a very real sense, viewing pornography is communion with death. Overall, then, pornography shifts the focus from an interpersonal action that is designed to reaffirm who we are as made in the image of God into a solitary action that further divides the person from the body, thus contributing to shame and anticipating death. And if there is no shame in producing pornography or viewing pornography, that doesn't make it acceptable, but just shows how far we have really fallen because we don't object to our objectification. In normal human functioning, shame acts as a self-defense against being viewed as a mere body. But too often we have become shameless. As Jeremiah says, we don't even know how to blush. Here's what I'm getting at. The sexual relationship as God intended and pornography may have some superficial similarities. Both involve bodies in a similar state of dress. Both involve similar hormonal responses. But they can only be put in the same category if we first depersonalized the human person. Their true nature is as different as the East is from the West. One dehumanizes, disembodies, depersonalizes. The other humanizes, embodies, leads us to understand who we really are. Okay, then, how do we oppose this? I want to give you a list of 5 things we should do. Now, I have to qualify this list a bit because, first of all, this isn't the same list I would give to somebody who's struggling with it. And this also isn't the list of things that I assume you probably already know you need to do, like being part of a healthy church and have people in your life who can speak hard truths to you. I assume you know that. I'm giving you a list of other things that I think function on a more subtle level. They are designed to create a culture resistant to pornography. Number 1, cultivate meaningful friendships. Know and be known. Now, I'm not saying that just with a view towards having people in your lives who you can talk to when you feel tempted. Rather, we should do that, of course. But have meaningful relationships. Because if you habituate yourself to knowing people deeply, it becomes harder to look at a person, any person, as a mere object. There are habits you inculcate into your lives when you know people deeply. And that will help you as you look at any person. So know people deeply. Number 2, cultivate an appreciation and a theology for real beauty. Part of the attraction to pornography is that people are beautiful. They are made in God's image, so why wouldn't they be? But pornography squashes that beauty because it looks at a body as a means to an end, as the trigger for sexual responses. And see, the thing about beauty is you can never use it for another end. The thing about beauty is that you appreciate it for what it is itself. C.S. Lewis said that sexualizing the body outside of the context of marriage is sort of like looking at a great waterfall as if it were something you could use to take a drink out of. We lived in Zambia and went to Victoria Falls. This amazing, powerful waterfall. If you look at it as something that might be useful for taking a drink, you will not appreciate it for what it really is, and if you try to use it for that, it will kill you. Part of the reason I think we're so susceptible to pornography is that we don't have a category for beauty for its own sake, and we don't have an appreciation for beauty for its own sake. Thus, we need to cultivate a sense of wonder and awe at beauty in a variety of forms. The beauty of mountains, the beauty of sunsets, the beauty of children. If we respect the beautiful as majestic, mysterious, echoes from another world, transcendent, if we do that, then we won't be so quick to co-opt beauty, human beauty, to our own purposes. We'll realize that that's not what you do with beauty. And I think one of the reasons the church is so vulnerable to pornography is that we have almost no theology of beauty. We don't have it at the academic level, and we certainly don't have it at the functional level. So cultivate an appreciation for beauty, a theology of beauty. Number 3, notice, and this is kind of continuation of number 2, but notice how people's faces capture their whole person. Take up photography. Try to capture somebody's story in their face. Take up drawing. I lived in Turkey, as I mentioned before, and one time I took a picture of this old man, and I was just amazed at how his face seemed to tell his story. I was also, in grade school, I did some oil painting. And I remember one time I painted a replica of a famous painting of somebody's face, and mine did not look nearly as good as the original artist, and like nowhere close, not even to be compared. But yet I captured something of the essence of the person. I thought that was pretty cool, to capture something of the nature of that person in their face. There's a sense of awe and wonder in a face. And cultivate an appreciation for that. That will help you see the person as a person. And number 4, laugh with others often. Again, laughter is one of those things that is inherently embodying, right? You can't fake a laugh, or if you do, it's pretty obvious. You don't have that much control over how you laugh, and yet it is you who laugh. You can't say my body is laughing as you could say my leg is twitching. Laughter fights that depersonalization that happens when we look at others or are looked at as a mere body. From my experience, those who habitually view pornography don't laugh much. And those who are in good, satisfying marriages or good or godly single people, they laugh often. And number 5, and here we're coming to the end, worship God. And you can do this married or single. That is, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Worshiping God is the most embodying reality that we do, activity that we do. But of course, we can't do that when we feel shame, can we? Adam and Eve felt shame and they hid from God. And after that, we've all been hiding. But God enacted a plan to save his people. God the Son came in true human nature and experienced the horror and shame of everything bad that the people could throw on him. And not only that, he experienced the wrath of God for our human rebellion. He did that so that all who believe in him would connect with God and connect with others, would be saved, would know him. It is only Christ who can rescue us from the separation of our body and our soul and unite us perfectly and fully for what we were created to be. One church father put it this way. He said that the glory of God is seen in a human fully alive. And Jesus is the glory of God. And he became human so he could share that glory with us. C.S. Lewis pictures this at the end of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The white witch has turned many people into stone, but Aslan, the Christ figure, breathes on them, and they become alive again. Pornography depersonalizes, dehumanizes, and destroys. But Jesus has come that we may have life and have it abundantly. Well, if my attempt to impersonate a demon has any truth in it at all, it is tragic that something so, in some ways, silly as pornography could delay the gospel going to the nations, and yet I think that is what is happening. It is worth spending effort to create a culture that resists pornography. That means cultivating in ourselves and our families and our churches a right theology of beauty, of the body, of marriage, of sex. We should do that for the sake of the gospel going to the nations. And even more, we should do that for the glory of God.